all. Stumbling around, you've been guessing your direction. Next time you can see it all.
Alright, thanks guys for coming back, viewing, subscribing, and listening to All We Have to Say. This is our 4th podcast now. Love Can't Be Stupid. I have a special guest, Brandon, here.
Hello.
And he's here to talk about, addiction, mental health, which is a big thing. And you know that we focus on this, and it's a huge thing in our society now. There's a lot of negative aspects to how people think, and as sad as it is, that's really how it goes. But you are a recovering addict.
I am.
And you you're in high school, you're 17.
Yeah.
You're like 8 feet tall. That's really cool. but yeah, every person that I have come on here, or the people that I meet that want to come on the podcast, dude, they're all taller than me. And it's like, what? It's weird. But so talk about your recovering addiction. Like you had mentioned to me earlier that it depended on the day what you did what your drug of choice was, and so it probably went all over the place. And what was that like for you? Was there a moment where you were just really down bad and you're like, holy cow, I need help and I need to stop?
So I would say starting off with changing the DOC every day.
Mm-hmm.
Different moods for me, honestly. If I'm in a mood of being, hey, I'm sad or I'm feeling down, I'm gonna want to go harder, get more messed up with myself. And it's also just what I see around me is hey, my friend outside of my recovery school is smoking weed. I'm maybe that's a trigger for me, and I'm gonna want to go up the benzos road,
Of course.
And I for sure had those moments where I've been down bad, especially with smoking weed. I remember at one point I made a bong out of a water bottle.
Oh, we've all been there.
I made a bong out of a water bottle, and I'm sitting outside my room trying to smoke it and trying to hide it. And
you gotta get out the window, you gotta blow it out in the sun. Yeah, exactly.
Still got caught though. And that road ended up taking me to treatment.
Good. Yeah. Well, at least you were in the right mind state, that you understood that you needed help. In my aspect, when I was using, I didn't understand that. I never asked. Well, I don't want to say that I never asked for help, because I did from close friends and family members, but less of family members, because I didn't want to embarrass myself, and that was an ego thing, and I had to drop the ego. But I never went to treatment. And I think that if something happens again, I think that will be the first option that I go to after talking to people like you, and that you had the motivation and the arithmetic to actually go to treatment and help yourself. And another thing is everybody has a battle that they're dealing with that nobody knows anything about, and so obviously you've had a battle, and in many different ways. And if you could put it into a few words, how did that affect you? You have a battle. How did you feel about telling people? Because that's a hard thing.
Oh, yeah. So I got sent into treatment. I actually didn't go. I was forced to go. But the whole reason why that treatment...
That's a blessing, to be honest.
That's why it worked out for me, is because in treatment, the first few weeks, I'm I don't want to do this stuff. I'm going back right after. And then as you kind of go on, your mind, you have to change your mindset in there and be hey, maybe this is a problem. Maybe this is a problem for me. Maybe I do want to change. And telling my friends and family, or just peers in general, about what I was going through was probably one of my biggest challenges. And I came out of high school I just kind of disappeared almost. No one knew where I went, where I went, or had gone. So it was kind of weird. I only had a certain few people around me, and during that time, and they limit that inside of treatment.
What did you take out of it in a positive aspect?
Some things really helped learn, or I took away from that experience, was a lot of people skills. I'm a very social person. I love talking. I'm extroverted as hell. but I just didn't have boundaries and communication skills too. Like if my friend said, hey, let's go do something, it doesn't matter what it is, I would usually go do it. And even if I'm uncomfortable with it or I'm not okay with it, I would still let it happen, let it fly. And that's where that treatment really helped me kick in with like, hey, I need to set boundaries with people because that's how our relationship is going to work. Like if you want that to work out, whether it's friends, family, whoever, you need boundaries and you need communication. And that treatment really helped me learn, hey, what does a healthy relationship really look like? And it scared me a little bit with what they show you and what they tell you about what you're using. But again, that addict mindset came in where I'm like, whatever. Like,
I don't care about that. It's a deterrent, of course, and it really does help you to realize like the negatives. Like whenever I was using, I would definitely go to Google and before I used and made sure that I was doing it safe, and I would look at charts on what you can take with something else, candy flipping, all this stuff. And there was a certain point where I was like, screw it, I don't care. I mean, if I die, I'm gonna go out with a bang or something like that. But I never did something that was so dangerous, like nothing super hard. I never got into pills. I tried one once or twice maybe, but you know, I had my choice of LSD, and that was, you know, it wasn't as dangerous as other things. The only thing that's dangerous about it is N-bomb, and that's fake, and you can take just a little bit and you can just die right on the spot because it's so fake. And with relapse, I mean, see, I had a lot of, you know, struggles with, you know, doing it constantly. I mean, I had done so much, and I just got into the mode where I was so tolerant to it. So I upped the dose up to, like, believe it or not, 40 tabs at one time, and that a huge mistake, of course, and that was the biggest thing that's the biggest regret that I have. But like, what was I mean, the drug of choice, I mean, you said it's kind of based off of the day and how you're feeling and stuff, but what was it like? So you're going to high school and it's a recovery high school. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, so a little rundown on what kind of that looks like. There's 4 like pretty big recovery schools. There's Insight, which is where I go. It's in White Bear. There's Pease Academy, which is in Minneapolis, and then there's one in Rochester and one in St. Cloud. And they're all schools with recovering addicts, and kind of like going through what our day looks like. I go to a ALC, and they keep us really separated because a lot of the kids at ALC do use, or it's pretty common there. But we are kind of in our own bubble. We go to our classes, but it's smaller class sizes, which I personally like. It helps me focus better. There's less distractions.
I agree with that.
I have ADHD, so it's like there's a lot going on. But
and I feel like everybody has ADHD nowadays.
In some form.
I was just, the last podcast I was just talking about with this guy, because Caleb, he has ADHD, and I have ADHD, and the thing that we kind of touched on the subject of like, every kid is diagnosed with ADHD. If they have something going on, the doctor immediately says, oh, they have ADHD, because it's such a broad spectrum that there's so many levels to ADHD, and so they never really pinpoint the actual, like,
what's going on.
Exactly what's going on in the brain chemistry and stuff, which is hard. I'm not a scientist or anything, so I'm sure they're doing as much as they can, but at the same time, leaves us with questions.
But I mean, it's really like kept in their group, and then as you work hard and go through those steps of recovery and kind of grow your process and recover and like show that you are recovering, we have different phases, and so if you get into like a phase 2, you can go to the different classes, so you can choose, hey, maybe I want to go to like clay, or maybe I want to do some more physics because I need physics credits or whatever.
Oh, I love that. That sounds dope. If I was still in high school, dude, I'd definitely go there. Yeah.
It's awesome, and they also have credit recovery where I go. So I'm actually on track to graduate a half year early right now.
Dang, dude, I graduated a year late.
Yeah, it's really nice. And at the end of the day, we come together. It's our last period of every class, or last period of our day, and we have what's called group. So we usually start off with group as a reading. We have a book, we do a reading, and we kind of say, how do we relate to this reading? We go around the circle, and then whatever our drug and alcohol counselor decides, we go with the flow.
See, that's interesting. See, I went to a school where it was project-based. It wasn't anything with recovery. What was the name of this school?
Insight.
Insight, okay. I'll put it up on there. But, I went to the school where it was project-based, and so you made a project, and how much time and effort you put into it, and the learning targets you met would count as credit, and depending on how much you put in, the credit would come out. And I liked that. It wasn't for everybody. The first year that I went there, I got maybe like 1 credit, and then the next year I got another credit because I had no clue how it worked. And so then the last 2 years I tried to buckle down as much as I possibly could, but I was so distracted with whatever ADHD, whatever I have, and it was so tough because I was trying to be a social butterfly. I was trying to fit in. I was trying to have my high school experience at this really small 172 student school, but all of them used as well, and so that's what really got me into all this, because somebody was telling me like, oh yeah, no, there's this drug that like you just like lay down and you start flying through space, and I was like, holy cow, that sounds dope. And so then I got into LSD, and then and then we like we talked on that with each other. That was our relationship, and that was built on like just complete usage of a chemical, and that was the worst thing. But at the time I didn't understand that. But with like addiction, what was your replacement strategy? Because like when you have an addiction, you have to replace it with something else. You can stop cold turkey, but to make it easier on yourself, you have to do something else, like chewing bubble gum instead of drinking coffee.
For me, I could never go cold turkey. I would fail. I've tried with nicotine, and my biggest streak was 2 days. Like, it's real hard to cold turkey for me. So I ended up going and trying literally everything I could, activity wise, and just seeing what fit me. So I ended up finding a lot of different activities that I like to do and trying to replace that. Like, hey, maybe if I'm like snowboarding, I love to snowboard. If I'm snowboarding, I'm not thinking about...
You're distracted.
Yeah.
Of course.
I'm not thinking about anything else but that. And it's a borderline, like, mindfulness. Like, borderline meditation for me.
Of course. Do you ever meditate?
In my own ways, I guess you could say.
What kind of ways do you meditate?
Just using mindfulness in its own ways. So, like, having the control of your thoughts in your brain, and being in, like, a peaceful spot where nothing else matters but yourself in that moment, and trying to become at peace with yourself.
My friend was trying to explain the different levels of meditation, and like the Buddhist monks. Oh my goodness, dude, that's ridiculous. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, holy cow, you don't even have to do any research just to understand like how nuts that is. And there was this story about this monk who was given LSD, and this is another story that I was very curious about, and that's like when I was using as well. And he was given LSD, and they said, okay, prepare, buddy, like buckle up, this is gonna hit you. Nothing at all, because he was already at that spot where, and I don't know if the story is true, but it's a story. But that like they're so serious about everything. And my friend put it in a good way. The meditation that he and I have tried to do is you sit there for the longest amount of time that you possibly can and think about nothing at all. Literally nothing. Like, absolutely. And that's a hard concept.
It is.
Absolutely nothing. Like, don't even think that you're there. Like, and that's where they're at. Like, they have, like, I don't know where they're at. I can't put it into words, but they have just peacefulness on a different level. And that's how they practice their lives. And it's insane. But, with, the addiction aspect and mental health more. So you were saying that you had struggles with like mental health and in a relationship.
Tons.
Yeah. Did you what was the first time where you're like, holy cow, this does not seem right. Like, this isn't okay.
So I don't blame anyone for having or giving me mental health or like experiences I've had for getting mental health. I think that was already an underlying thing that just was like buried deep down in my brain.
Yeah.
But so COVID year 2020, I had 9 really close family members pass away on me, and one of my friends too.
I'm sorry.
It's okay, but that experience really changed me in a drastic way. And that's kind of where my use came from is like, I don't want to deal with losing all these people. Like, it like literally went from a Christmas party of like 50 to like, it felt like 12.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like the weirdest thing ever, and that was the most like harmful thing for my mental health, because one of those people actually lost my mom, and that was the most hard thing I have done in my life by far. And kind of coping with that and dealing with that made me stronger, but I went down a path where it wasn't the best choice, but I came out on the other side, thank God.
Yeah, and you, like, to touch on that too, you reached out to God through this whole thing, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And there's times where everybody, and me including, everybody, they're like, nah, God, get away from me.
Yeah.
I don't want none of this.
Yeah.
And the leading question for people asking about Christianity is, if God's real, then why does he let these bad things happen?
To make you a stronger person.
That, and I think without good, it wouldn't be bad. And like he gave us the greatest gift of free will.
Yeah.
And that's a huge gift, and we can't put it into perspective even with ourselves. We can try. I mean, you can be a philosopher for 990 years like Methuselah,
Mm-hmm.
but you're never gonna figure it all out, because we're in the demo mode. There's locks on our life, and there's things that we, like the red and blue. We can't realize all these things, or else we'll lose our absolute noggin, dude.
Yeah.
Our brain will explode. And was there ever a moment where you were like, okay, God's speaking to me, let me listen?
Yeah. So my mom passed on leap year, actually.
Mm.
So that was really interesting to me, but
Mm-hmm.
later in the year my grandma passed away.
Mm.
And this was after, she was one of the last deaths. I think she was third to last of the 9, so 6. I live by a pond, and there's a hill right by the pond, and I remember getting out of the car. My mom was on the phone. She got a call. It was nighttime, and the moon was out, full moon. And I look at her, and I'm like, did Xavier just kill himself? One of my friends, or consider him my brother. And I'm just looking at him, like, my mind's pacing. I'm like thinking, who died? Like, what happened? And this is after 6 deaths. Like, it did something to me. It changed my mind. I'm like, what's going on? Like, who is she talking to? And it ended up my grandma passed away. And, like, my heart dropped. And I was just in shock. And so I walked across the street to the pond, sat on the hill all night. Just stared at the moon all night until the sun rose.
Yeah, that's deep. I mean, that's what you needed to do, and you didn't realize what you were doing, I'm sure, at the time.
I had no clue. Like, it was just like, I'm just gonna do it, and like, my body kind of brought me there in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like thinking about everything.
I had a very similar situation happen recently. So my cousin, one of my closest cousins, I used to hang out with him. He was probably my favorite cousin as a kid, but you can't really say that, so don't listen to that. But he was like somebody that I looked up to, and then we used to just hang out all the time when we were like occasions at grandma's house, And then one day I came up to him, I was like, how's it going? And like, as normal, and he said, who are you? And I said, oh, what are you talking about? What do you mean? And he's like, no, who are you? And I was like, I'm Jake. And so like I gave into it, but then like after I was so confused, so I went to my mom and I said, what's wrong with? And she said, he had an accident, and he had a stroke. And then just recently, like on Christmas Day, I learned that he pulled over in a car, and he walked outside when it was like negative 11 degrees, and he laid down and he froze to death. And so after that, my body just kind of brought me, like a couple days later, I was like, holy cow. And so I went outside when it was like negative 11 again. It was so cold, and I went outside with a sweatshirt, and I spent 5 hours outside and just like walked around the neighborhood, just because I feel like now I start to understand that it was because he died that way that I was trying to feel. And that was just me in my emotions, God, and him. That was the stupidest decision, because I was walking around in the woods, and then I like sat down in the middle of the road for a while, and like for 5 hours I did a lot of things, and I just like thought, and I sat there, and I didn't feel cold enough, and so I sat up on the bench at my front door, And I had sweatpants and shorts underneath, so I took off the sweatpants, and then I took off my sweatshirt to have a t-shirt on, and I sat there for like another hour. And then I started to feel like real cold. Like there's many levels to this.
Yeah.
But I started to like really start to feel tired, and like not like a normal tired. It's more of like I started to feel a little bit warm. There's another story, a lady that she went to get her mail, and it was so cold outside that she thought she was heating up, so she took off her jacket, and then she laid at the end of her driveway and she froze to death. Because at a certain level of hypothermia, you think that you're starting to like
get warm,
burn up. Yeah. And so then I went inside, and I didn't know how cold I was until I shivered the whole night and could not get warm until like I fell asleep in the morning, which is ridiculous. And people cope with different losses and different things in different ways, and that's the basic of our podcast, is that we want to hear. So I really appreciate you sharing that, because this is like what we want to hear. And everybody is going through something. They don't need to tell anybody, but again, we have an Instagram page. I check it every single day, and if you reach out, and even if you want to go as far to be a guest on this podcast, then I am all for it. I will ask some questions. I want to get to know you as a person, and I hope that you can get to know us as well, all of the guests and everybody, and the deep talks. And so it takes a lot of courage for you to talk about this on like for everybody to see. You don't know who's gonna see this. I mean, it's cool. And you told me you got butterflies. I mean, every time I do this too, I get a little nervous, and I don't think that'll ever change. Maybe it will. I hope it doesn't, because that helps me as a person, I think. But the positive aspects of your addiction, and what did you take out positively? I know I'm asking like the generic questions, but like, I can tell that you've overcome that, and you've taken it out in a positive aspect. But how did you do that? That's the question I have.
Putting myself through hell and back, as in mental ways, physical ways, like in every single way possible. You have to struggle to get stronger.
Were you scared when you subconsciously or consciously made the decision where you're like, okay, I'm gonna make myself suffer?
I was at a point in life where my mental health was on a very fast decline, and I mentally was not okay, and I was like, I'm gonna die if I keep doing this. So I had to choose life or death. To me, in that way, it seemed to like life or death for me.
Yeah, that's quite the predicament. That's quite the fork in the road for somebody that's actually gone through it. Same with addiction as well. Like, you got to reach that new high. Like, every time you use, you're like, oh, but I want to go back to the first time and had that experience. And that's kind of how it is with the emotions too. And that's where it gets really complicated with our consciousness and scary. Like, holy cow, I want to go back to the way that I felt before, but how do I get there? And that's the confusing part for a lot of people. That's the struggle. And
it's different for every single person. Our journeys are all completely different. We came up from, all three of us in the room right now have came from completely different places.
Oh, yeah.
And like you said, we struggle with our own stories and what we're going through, and it's true.
I think the hard part for, being, our experiences being so subjective is that we feel so alone because nobody else will know it like we do. And that's something I've struggled with, and I'm sure that you have, and I'm sure that the people behind the camera have too. But, that's a real topic, and it's scary, very scary, that you feel so alone that you don't know who to talk to. And if you were to talk to somebody, they would judge you. And so you came to the realization that you wanted to, change, and that was a big part in your life. But do you still remember the exact moment that you were in, like the emotions that you felt, to tell somebody else if they were going through the exact same thing, what to look out for?
Look out for as in what do you mean?
As in looking out for, as in that you want change in yourself. And what were the leading factors of that realization?
Self-contentness, being content with myself and being happy with life. Even though I've felt like I've been to the worst points in human history, you could say, I don't know, just really terrible spots, I've came out so much happier.
Amen.
This past year for me has been the best year I've had in a few years. I feel like almost my whole life. Like, I'm growing up. I feel a genuine contentness because I set up myself for success. That's plain and simple. Like,
dude, that's the one, dude. I always
trying to put
up,
myself for success. Like, the relationships I have, I've cut off everyone who's toxic, everyone who doesn't treat me right.
Let's get it, dude. You made the steps.
My favorite quote that I've ever told anyone that I've ever met was to my friend Connor, and I said, "Don't take people's BS. Don't do it. It's not like you don't have to. It's not worth it." And so setting myself up for success has honestly made me happy. And like when I think about it, I was in the worst spot last year, 2 years ago, and I'm hopefully on the other side.
But well, hey, you came here to talk to me today, and that means you're still alive. You woke up this morning, dude.
Yeah.
That's an accomplishment by itself. You got out of bed, you did your own thing, and you came here, and you're willing to talk about this, which is dope. And that you got to take into consideration the little tiny things that you do every day. If you were to count up, and I heard this somewhere from one of my friends, if you were to count up or even tally the things throughout the day, the negatives and positives, don't matter how little, how big, I can almost 90% to 100% guarantee, 100% guarantee that there's going to be more positives. Just because you're thinking about them.
Yeah.
And you don't want to focus, and with that exercise, you don't want to focus on the negative. Some people do, and so they might have more negatives just because some people are happier being sad, and that's a true reality. But people like you that are really working to recover themselves, and mentally and physically, and with chemicals, I can guarantee that you'll find more positives, and that's an exercise that anybody can work on. I should work on it more often too.
I was thinking, I can't think of negatives right now. Exactly. I'm trying to think of something, but I can't.
That's the kind of atmosphere that we want. We want to get down deep, but at the same time, this is a positive thing that we're doing. You're a part of now. Yeah. It's real cool. Well, I think that's about all the time that we have right now. But, I really appreciate you coming on, taking the time out of your day. Absolutely, dude. We'll have you on again, of course. But this is Brandon for you, everybody. I'll put his Instagram, I'll put his YouTube, whatever you have.
I'll send it to you.
Of course. He's making beats, too. So you better release those. Dude, I swear. Maybe. I swear, dude. Don't say maybe. You got to
put it on the SoundCloud.
Put it on the SoundCloud, dude. I'll drop his SoundCloud, too, if he's willing. Whatever he wants me to drop, I'll drop on there. But again, thank you for coming in. I can't thank you enough. This has been a real opportunity. I love having guests on like you and other people because it opens my mind a lot more, because I have been known to have a closed mind, but the last couple of years I've opened it more and more and more, and after doing this podcast for about 4 episodes, there's a lot that's changed.
That's good.
But we appreciate you guys as the audience coming to hear and talk with us in the comments and wherever you want to share your feelings. But pray for Gavin. He's going through a rough spot in his life, and we're just there for him, and that's all we can do right now is pray, and pray for his well-being. But again, thank you guys for coming in and listening, viewing, subscribing, and commenting if you choose. We love the support, and again, I can't thank you enough for all the support that you've given us. So raw is real is raw. That's what Gavin loves to say. Yeah. And it's a good phrase, because this is what it is, and it is what it is. Thanks for coming in, and we'll see you next week, promptly. We'll see you next week.